Hey girl, let's talk crime. I know y'all see like some stuff is a little bit different in the background, so let me tell you what happened. Like, I'm really jumpy. So the other day, I kept hearing stuff. Like, I record either at night or when my children go to school, and I kept hearing stuff, and I'm like, what is that sound? So I would keep coming into the living room because I record in my craft room. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to come in here and record this video for TikTok in the living room. And then, you know, that way I don't have to keep coming in here, because I know that they were outside, like, you know, doing something with the dumpster. And then I think, you know, landscaping, it feels a lot better. Like, I like recording here. I don't know what's going on in the back, you know what I mean? But I think I'm going to be sitting here for a while. So I have been recording my TikTok videos here. And now that I'm recording a YouTube video, the back is not all that like special. But you know what? We're going to get that together. Let's just focus on the story.
Hey girl, let's talk crime. 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 Ludicrous, crazy, bizarre. Bone chilling tales that'll leave you left in awe. No sugar coat, no filter. Raw. Let's talk crime with your host and your song. Hey girl, let's talk.
Tonight, we are going to be talking about the serial killer, Jerry Brudos. Jerome Henry Jerry Brudos was born on January 31st, 1939 in the small town of Webster, South Dakota, to his parents, Henry and Eileen Brudos. So his mother, Eileen, was not too happy about being pregnant. However, she had her heart set on having a girl. She had already had an older son, and when she got pregnant with Jerry, it was not something that she wanted. When Jerry was born, she was beyond disappointed, and she was not shy about Jerry knowing it. He was subjected to emotional and physical abuse, while his older brother, Larry, was treated with a lot of love and kindness. When Jerry was younger, the family would move around quite often between California, Oregon, and South Dakota, but eventually they did settle down in Salem, Oregon. When Jerry was around 5 years old, he developed an obsession for women's shoes and panties. He once found a pair of high heels at a junkyard that he was playing in. He brought them home, and one day his mother caught him in these shoes, and she flipped, like completely flipped out. She called him wicked. She told him to get rid of the shoes, and Jerry tried to hide them, but she did find them and ultimately burned them. It was said that in the first grade, Jerry tried to steal his teacher's high heel shoes from underneath her desk. When his older brother Larry would bring friends over, specifically girls, Jerry would attempt to steal their shoes as well. And it wasn't just shoes. He wanted women's panties too. But this wasn't just some innocent liking for women's shoes and clothing. It wasn't an identity crisis, like he didn't think he was trans. But this obsession grew into something really, really dark, and Jerry was sexually aroused by women's shoes and panties. In 1956, Jerry was 17 years old, and his sexual fantasies have now become a scary reality. He was stalking women in his neighborhood simply to take their shoes. He did kidnap a teenage girl. He brutally beat her and forced her to take nude photos. But this was not some spur of the moment assault. He had dug a hole that he had actually planned to keep her and many others as sex slaves. Just like when his mother caught him with the high heels when he was just 5 years old, Jerry was also caught with this incident and was ultimately sent to the psychiatric ward at the Oregon State Hospital. It was there that doctors would say that he had a hatred for not only women, but also his own mother, Eileen. While in the hospital, Jerry told his deepest, darkest fantasies: kidnapping women, placing their bodies in the freezer, and having free will over moving them in different sexual positions. But the doctors didn't think anything was necessarily wrong with Jerry, but that he just needed to grow up, you know, mature. And after 9 months and being diagnosed with schizophrenia, Jerry was released from the hospital and then would go on to graduate from high school in 1957. Jerry did join the Army in March 1959, but was discharged by October of that same year, possibly due to his mental health. By 1961, he had met and married a 17-year-old by the name of Darcy Metzler. They had 2 children, and they did settle down in Oregon. Neighbors would say that they were a pretty normal family. Jerry seemed nice, a devoted family man who didn't drink or smoke, and you would rarely hear him curse. So Jerry would go through periods of dressing like a woman. The clothing and shoes that he would keep them stashed in the garage, and his wife Darcy was absolutely prohibited from going into the garage or the attic of their home without first asking for permission from Jerry. Jerry also demanded that Darcy cook and clean naked, as well as wear heels, and it was an odd request. However, she did agree in the beginning of their marriage. I'm not here to kink shame anyone, but we all know from Jerry's childhood leading up to his teenage years that this was just no innocent kink. With Darcy doing everything that he demanded, it seemed like Jerry was finally sexually satisfied. But just after a few years, their marriage did become strained, and Darcy began putting her focus on raising her children, and she was no longer acting out his demands, which caused Jerry to stray. We're not talking about infidelity. We're not talking about, looking at other women or talking to coworkers. We're talking criminal crimes. He began stalking women in his neighborhood, looking to feed this dark, dark obsession. And in 1967, he found exactly what he was looking for. Jerry noticed a woman that was walking downtown. It wasn't her looks or her beauty or even her hair that caught his eye. It was her shoes. So he followed her home and waited for her to go to sleep before he broke into her home and strangled and raped her before stealing her shoes and leaving. This would really awaken something inside of Jerry. He couldn't get enough, and he was so turned on by her limp body after the attack that he knew that he had to keep going. But he didn't have to stalk or wait for his next victim. She walked right into his sick trap. On January 26, 1968, 19-year-old saleswoman Linda Slauson was selling encyclopedias in Jerry's neighborhood when she knocked on the door. Jerry pretended to be interested in purchasing an encyclopedia and invited Linda in. He then lures her to the basement, where he hits her in the head and strangles her to death, all while his children and wife are upstairs. He drags her body to the garage, where he would dress her up in his collection of stolen women's clothing. He then cuts off her foot and freezes it, and he would go on to use her foot to model the other stolen shoes. Shortly after murdering Linda, he ties her body to a car engine and disposes it in the Willamette River. This would be the beginning of his murderous spree. In November 1968, Jerry was driving on Interstate 5 between Salem and Albany when he spots a 23-year-old by the name of Jan Whitney. Now, her car had broken down, and Jerry offered to give her a ride and told her that he would allow her to use his home phone so that she could call a tow truck to come and retrieve her car. While they were still in the car, Jerry rapes her and strangles Jan to death. He then takes her to his home, where he hoisted her body from the pulley in his garage. He would have sex with her corpse multiple times before cutting off one of her breasts, creating a resin mold out of it and using it as a paperweight. He then weighed her body down and threw her in the Willamette River. In March 1969, Jerry abducted 18-year-old Karen Sprinkler at gunpoint in the parking lot of a department store. It was said that he would often wear women's clothing during some of these attacks. He then took Karen to his garage where he forces her to put on his collection of stolen clothes. He rapes and strangles her. He does have sex with her corpse multiple times before throwing her body in the Willamette River. On April 21st and April 22nd, 1969, he had attempted to abduct 24-year-old Sharon Wood as well as 15-year-old Gloria Smith. Literally the next day, on April 23rd, 1969, he abducted 22-year-old Linda Saley from the parking lot of a shopping plaza. His MO did not change. He raped and strangled Linda, and he kept her body in his garage to continue mutilating her corpse. He eventually tied her body to a transmission to weigh it down and threw it in the river. Jerry would often dress in women's clothing and masturbate after killing his victims. And I did read an article about Jerry subconsciously wanting to be a woman to please the woman that he hated, which was his mother, because she hated that he was not a woman. Just really twisted stuff, but that really made a lot of sense. And so the following month, in May 1969, a fisherman would find the body of Linda Saley in the river. And while police were searching the river, they found the body of Karen Sprinkler. As police began to investigate these murders, they started with a nearby university. They would ask the students there if they had seen or heard anything suspicious, and this is when police learned from a lot of the women on campus that there was a Vietnam vet who would often ask the young women out on dates. This person was none other than Jerry Brudos. Because he had given a fake address, they did not know where he lived, and they asked one of the young women to set up a date with him in an attempt to locate and question him about these murders. Jerry falls for it, and now he is being interrogated by the police. And at some point, they do decide to investigate further. They do get a search warrant for his home, and there they would find all the evidence that proved that Jerry was their man. Jerry was behind all of these murders. They found ropes, photographs of the women who were now deceased, and of course his collection of body parts from his victims. Jerry did confess to the 4 murders, the attempted abductions, as well as the assaults. He was found guilty of killing 23-year-old Jan Whitney, 18-year-old Karen Sprinkler, and 22-year-old Linda Saley. He was never charged in the murder of 19-year-old Linda Slauson, who he lured into his basement because her body was never recovered, although he did confess to murdering her. In June 1969, he was sentenced to 3 life terms in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Some people and authorities did suspect that Darcy, his wife, knew a lot more about his crimes. She was charged with aiding and abetting Jerry in those crimes. However, she was never convicted. After he was arrested, she did divorce him. She changed her name as well as her children's names, and they moved to an undisclosed location. While Jerry was in prison, he would collect women's clothing magazines. He said that this was a substitute for pornography, but we all know it was just another way to feed into his dark, sinister obsession. He was often beaten by other inmates, and I'm not sure if that had to do with his crimes against women or just issues with other inmates. March 28, 2006, after serving 37 years in prison, Jerry Brudos died at the age of 67 from liver cancer. At the time of his death, he was the longest incarcerated inmate in the Oregon Department of Corrections. So, thank you guys for tuning in for another video of Hey Girl, Let's Talk Crime. I truly appreciate it. If you want to support my channel, I would appreciate you subscribing and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified every time I do upload a video. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye.